Hello everyone, welcome to the Iron Bars of my True Crime YouTube channel. So guys, I have a small little story time that I would like to share with you of how my interest for true crime began. So at least I think this is the reason why I took an interest in true crime. So this begins in year 2001. I just finished high school a year ago and I decided that I was going to take a gap year and just relax and unwind and get to enjoy the last bits of my teenagehood. And so around July, August, or something like that, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to sit here forever and I don't want to get addicted to just sitting at home doing nothing, even though I was trying other things like, starting a business one way or the other. I decided that I am going to enroll myself at a university, one of the Oxford University colleges in the UK. And so I made my application. I got the results about 2 weeks later telling me that I've been accepted provisionally. And the reason why I was accepted provisionally is because I was short of 1 point. So in order for me to get fully accepted, I needed to write a selection test. So they sent me some materials for me to read to prepare for the selection test. Well, I did skim through the material and I was like, oh, okay, this is stuff that I did in high school anyway, so I don't think I have forgotten any of these things. Most of it was English, composition, and I think it was comprehension, literature, and composition. I think those are the three things that I would, oh yeah, and poetry as well. I mean, I kind of throve on those in high school anyway, so I thought bring it on. And on top of that, I decided that I was going to prepare by going to the Johannesburg Public Library, downtown Johannesburg. That library is huge. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So around 11:30 on the day when I had gone there, I remember it was a Wednesday, I decided to skim through while I'm taking a break and also to decompress from looking at stuff that I already knew. And I started going through the shelves of the library. There were many. I think the shelf line was about 30 or 35 or something like that. And so I go to this particular shelf and I just see with the corner of my eye a book that was in black and red cover with white captions. And it read The Shrine of Jeffrey Dahmer. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I take the book, look through it, I read the summary, and I'm like, oh, this sounds very interesting. And then I started reading the book, forgot all about preparing for my selection test, and I just got sucked into this book because I was blown away by what this man was doing to young boys and young men. And so I found myself having finished reading the whole 308 pages in just 4 hours because I was so invested in this story, trying to understand and get into the mind of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, I'm going to be making a disclaimer in this video simply because YouTube continuously change its policies when it comes to content that is posted on their platform. Now, you must understand that YouTube is the landlord and the landlord can change the rules anytime they want to. So there are some specific words that I will be improvising because I can no longer use them on this channel or any of the content that I post regarding true crime. Words that start with M, when you M a person, or words such as, the K word. I cannot use those words anymore, but I will improvise them. That does not mean I can't use them completely if I do not want to see certain features being changed into like yellow icons and things like that. Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a long explanation, but just know that to avoid those yellow icons, I am going to improvise these words. And I'm going to be using a lot of words such as unaliving, unaliver, serial unaliver, as well as delete. In most cases, when I use the word delete, it will be because of the individual that is vile that got deleted. And so I am not going to I'm not going to compromise my channel that way. However, if you feel uncomfortable or you don't appreciate that, I'm sorry, there's absolutely nothing I can do for you. I still want my YouTube channel and I don't want to get shadow banned or have my YouTube channel deleted. Now, let's talk about Jeffrey Dahmer. Who was Jeffrey Dahmer? So Jeffrey Dahmer confessed to unaliving 17 young men and young teenage boys. Some of these teenage boys were barely teenagers, like 13 years old. So Jeffrey Dahmer, he also knew that by targeting these specific vulnerable people who often discriminated because of their skin color as well as their sexual orientation, which often happened to be members of the LGBTQ community. Jeffrey Dahmer himself struggled with homosexuality but was in denial. And for some reason, that also made him extremely angry towards homosexuality. Now, the interesting or the contrasting part about it, he would bring these men or these young boys because of his desire to be with them, being attracted to them. And interestingly, these men were black, brown, and also came from poor communities. And he knew that by targeting this specific group of people, the police or the authorities will not care. Simply because in the 1970s through to the mid-90s, homophobia as well as racism was almost the order of the day. Just a decade earlier, the black people were fighting for civil rights and they won that battle. And some people still felt like, no, black people still belong to the bottom of the barrel. That also included the police system. So Jeffrey Dahmer, as a white man, knew that he had some privileges that he would get away if he committed heinous crimes against the marginalized, vulnerable, and poor people, whom always happened to be black, Hispanic, and other people of color. And interestingly, Jeffrey Dahmer was right. So Jeffrey Dahmer was born on the 21st of May 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA. He was born to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. Jeffrey's father was a research chemist at the University of Marquette, and his mother was a teletypist, and she struggled a lot with mental health issues. So Lionel and Joyce's marriage was toxic. These people were always on each other's throats in front of Jeffrey. 6 years later, Jeffrey Dahmer's brother David was born, and it was Jeffrey who named him. And the two boys, they did not quite get along, not because they were not getting along and fighting. David realized that his older brother was strange, so he didn't want to mess with that strangeness, and Jeffrey Dahmer himself took an interest when he was a young boy in dead animals. Some of these animals, I wonder if he did not unalive them because of the interest that he took in them. Sometimes he would literally go and hunt for dead animals, whether it's a dead bird, dead cat, or a dead stray dog. He would want to take care of it for some reason. And so his parents, they kind of dismissed this as a boy being a boy type of situation without realizing that this was actually bearing some kind of seed that was going to grow into the man-eater monster that Jeffrey Dahmer became as an adult. When he was a teenager, Jeffrey Dahmer, well, took another interest: alcoholism. He would go to school drunk. He literally used to carry a small flask on the right hand side of his pocket, and when a teacher would be writing on the blackboard, he would sneak into his mouth and take few sips, and in class he would be drunk and he would become a class clown, if you will, and he would pick on people that are living with disabilities. And of course, young people being young people, they are going to laugh. Jeffrey Dahmer was not also a bad looker, so obviously some people that took an interest in him found him interesting and they would laugh, even though Jeffrey Dahmer kept to himself. And that made people a little bit wary of Jeffrey Dahmer and also saw that he was a bit strange. Plus, alcoholism being involved, he was very reclusive when he became an adult. So when he turned 18 in 1978, he graduated from high school. And when he graduated that particular day, he found himself alone in the world because his father decided to disappear, leaving him in the family home, and his mother already divorced the father on the 24th of July 1978, just before Jeffrey Dahmer became 18 years old. She took David and went away with him. Goodness knows where to. I believe she kind of like moved to California or something like that. And Jeffrey Dahmer found himself alone in the world and having to fend for himself. However, luckily, he was left with a family home. And it was not a family home that you could say was also safe for him, because his father left a bar filled with alcohol, and that was a play field for Jeffrey. So with the constrained relationship between Jeffrey and his little brother David, they did not speak. They were not close. And it became even easier for David Dahmer when everything started unraveling on the news about his brother being a serial unaliver. It was easy for him to abandon his surname Dahmer, because he did not want to associate himself with a surname such as this one, where it traumatized literally the entire nation of the United States. And so he changed his entire identity and he never spoke again in public. He kind of like disappeared and went and lived his own life to this very day. So having finished high school, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer became even more reclusive, basically meaning a loner, a person that is into themselves, enjoy their own company. And people always looked at him as strange. Some people were uncomfortable with the way he was actually living his life. Yet he also harbored a secret life that he could not necessarily express it, because at the time in the United States, around the 1960s, 70s, 80s through the 90s, homosexuality was frowned upon. And so it frustrated him, because as a young boy in high school, he would watch other peers of his having girlfriends and able to express their love in public, and yet he couldn't get himself somebody that he was attracted to. Mostly would be a boy, and he would not be able to do the same things that the straight young boys were able to do with their girlfriends. So I think that also developed some kind of resentment towards young boys, also developed some kind of separation anxiety. And you will see how this actually plays out. This is my suspicion. Separation anxiety was probably the main reason why he did what he did. So everything starts unraveling when he turns 18 in 1978. So here Jeffrey Dahmer sitting at home bored and drinking some beers and probably very drunk. He sees a young man by the name of Stephen Hicks basically passing by his house. He was hitchhiking to a concert in the next town. So the 18-year-old Stephen Hicks, he then sees a car stop next to him, basically to ask him where he was headed to, and it was Jeffrey Dahmer, who actually offered Stephen a ride to the concert. And before they proceeded to the concert, this is when he tells Stephen, listen, let's go to my place and hang out, because now you have transport. It will be quicker to get to the town you are going to for your concert. So let's hang out and kill some time, and then I will take you to the concert. And of course, Stephen, looking at the time of day, it was early, like midday type of situation. He was like, yeah, let's kill some time. We'll drink some beers at my place, and then I will take you to your concert. So indeed, Stephen came back with Jeffrey Dahmer to his house. Stephen Hicks, who had gained some trust in Jeffrey Dahmer, went to Jeffrey Dahmer's house, and they started having some beers as Jeffrey had promised. And when it was about time for him to leave, because the concert was going to start in about an hour, he tells Jeffrey that, hey, I need to go. And so Jeffrey asked him, please don't leave me. And of course, Stephen Hicks was like, well, I don't want to get late for the concert, so I would like to leave. So as Stephen stood up, Jeffrey Dahmer took a dumbbell and smashed it on Stephen Hicks' head, throwing him immediately on the floor, started pounding on him with the dumbbells, then wrapped his hands around Stephen Hicks and strangled him to death. He then dragged his body down the house basement, where he dismembered him. And after dismembering him, he started burying, or he dug some shallow graves in the basement and buried Stephen Hicks. Now remember, Jeffrey Dahmer's father was a chemist, so there are some chemicals in the house, in the basement, including acid, which he used a little later when he decided to dig up all of Stephen Hicks's body parts, and he started pouring acid basically to dissolve them. And then he took the bones and crushed them, went outside to a nearby forest and scattered his bones all over. Of course, Stephen Hicks, he was never found, and now with all that has unraveled, his body will never be buried by his family. Now, Stephen Hicks was born on the 22nd of June 1959. He was born in Ohio, and he was a good-looking young man who had long hair, and he was shirtless on this particular day when he passed by Jeffrey Dahmer's house. Of course, Jeffrey Dahmer took an interest in him. Now, remember, the reason why Jeffrey Dahmer took a dumbbell and he hit Stephen Hicks on the head is because he asked him not to leave him. This is where I believe Jeffrey Dahmer struggled with separation anxiety, especially towards the people he felt attracted to and managed to get them into his space. Once they are in his space, he did not want them to leave. If they wanted to leave, they were going to leave as a body. So clearly in the 1970s, there was no campaign about not getting into a stranger's car. Well, it was the 1970s. Look at what the baby boomers were doing at that time. And I would shudder for you to ask your parents, where were you conceived? I can tell you, not in the bed, probably behind a bin somewhere in a rock concert. Oh, one detail that I forgot to mention, after he had unalived Stephen, Jeffrey Dahmer unzipped himself and began to skomora. And after he had done the skomoring, when he dismembered Stephen's body, buried the body parts in a shallow grave in his basement, and later on dug them up and then dissolved the flesh of the bones and then crushed the bones and went and scattered them in the forests. So Jeffrey Dahmer has unalived his first victim, and that shook him so much so that for the next 10 years he would not unalive another person. Well, he decided that he is going to try and put his life together. By number one, he got himself enrolled at the Ohio State University. Well, there are no records of what he was studying there, but he failed dismally, so much so that he decided to drop out. So after dropping out of college because of failing, he then decided that he is going to enroll himself or enlist himself in the US Army. Well, successfully he got in, did all the stuff that needed to be done for him to become a US military man, but he had one struggle. Well, he had two struggles, but the main struggle that he could not shake up or shake off was his alcoholism. This is the reason why the US Army kicked him with a dishonorable discharge. In September of 1987, Jeffrey Dahmer then decides to move in with his grandmother, who also lived in Wisconsin, not too far away from his family home. And so this is where everything begins to go down for Jeffrey Dahmer. And his urge to unalive again started burning, and this time around he could not control it, so much so that he immediately got on the plan to start unaliving again. Jeffrey Dahmer does say that, well, he tried to do the right thing by himself since Stephen Hicks, but things were just not going the way he wanted them to go. So he eventually found a job as a mixer at a chocolate factory in Wisconsin. Of course, it's a job that he don't particularly like, but it paid some of the bills, including his alcohol. And he was like, okay, fine, I'm a failure in life. And also, he cannot necessarily, at 27, be in a relationship with a person that he liked. Clearly, Jeffrey Dahmer was attracted to black men because most of his victims, well, all of his victims were black men and brown people. Probably brown people will be like 3 or 4 of them out of the 17 black men that he had unalived. So the reason why Jeffrey Dahmer moved in with his grandmother, it is because when he came back from the military, he got arrested for public disorderly because of drunkenness. And so he was arrested, but he was fined for that offense and then sent on probation. And his parents felt, listen, I think the best thing for him is to go and live with his grandmother because she will be a good influence to him. And so that's how he moved in with his grandmother. In August of 1982, Jeffrey Dahmer then decides to expose himself in front of people at a fair in Wisconsin, and he was fined $50 for that offense. And in 1986, Jeffrey Dahmer was caught by the police masturbating in public, and he said, no, I was urinating. He was sentenced to 1 year probation and sent away home. September of 1987, Jeffrey Dahmer meets 24-year-old Stephen Taomi, and they kind of like hit it off in a club called 219. It's a gay bar. This is where, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer would meet most of his victims, at a gay bar or at the mall or on the streets or at a bus stop, or when they're just doing other things. He would lure them with money and the promise of making them models, because he also pretended to be a model scout, like a male model scout, especially to people that took an interest in modeling. So Stephen Taomi was attracted, of course, to Jeffrey Dahmer, because it is said that Jeffrey Dahmer was quite a hot guy, like handsome, good body, and so Taomi felt an attraction and thought, well, I got myself a good one. And of course, Jeffrey Dahmer decided that they go to a hotel called the Ambassador Hotel, where I guess he thought that they were going to have, you know, some sort of bond, if you know what I mean. And so in the morning, when Jeffrey Dahmer woke up, he woke up with his hands covered in blood, and when he looked to his side, he sees that Taomi was dead, and he has no memory of what on earth happened last night. Well, remember, Jeffrey Dahmer is an alcoholic and possibly also did some few of, you know, the white powder stuff, and mixed with alcohol. I think he had a blackout and did the deed on Mr. Taomi, whom he had no idea what happened. He says he has absolute no memory of what happened. So Jeffrey Dahmer decided to go out and purchase a big blue bag or like a suitcase of some sort and stuffed Taomi's body inside and took it back to his grandmother's house. And then when he got to his grandmother's house, he turned on the stove and put the body of Taomi's into the pot and poured water and boiled it. Yeah, he boiled Mr. Taomi in that pot at his grandmother's house. However, he decided after boiling Stephen Taomi's body, he decided to keep the head. Yeah, he kept the head, but a few weeks later, he decided to crush it with a sledgehammer and discarded of the pieces. In November of 1987, he meets a 14-year-old James Dexter and he unalives him. How? He drugged him and strangled him and then discarded of his body. In March of 1988, he meets 22-year-old Richard Guerrero at a gay bar. Well, again, takes him home, drugs him, strangles him, and then dismembered his body and discarded of the body pieces. In September of 1988, Jeffrey Dahmer gets arrested because he sexually assaulted a 13-year-old boy. So between 1988 and 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer has developed what you would call a pattern on how he meets his victims, what does he do with them, and how he also discard of their bodies. So there came a time where his grandmother got sick and tired of Jeffrey Dahmer bringing in men at late hours of the night, and she would hear things downstairs in the basement that did not necessarily make her feel comfortable. One thing that really annoyed her was this terrible stench that was coming from the basement. And Jeffrey Dahmer just dismissed that as a bad meat gone bad or something like that. And the grandmother was like, you better take care of it. You need to keep my house clean, as I always do my side of the house. So if you're wondering how on earth was Jeffrey Dahmer able to lure all these men that he has unalived thus far, that's because his modus operandi was to basically make a promise to these men, either with cash, that he would pay them for taking photographs of them, and he would basically be specific what type of photos that he wanted from these men. Remember, some of these people come from poor background, others are vulnerable, others probably drug addicts, or they are alcoholic themselves, and $50 is a lot of money to satisfy their cravings or quench whatever thirst that they may have, and they would agree to Jeffrey Dahmer's offers. In most cases, he would pretend to be a male model scout, so that if you are an aspiring model, he would want to take photos of you, and then he would promise that he will take the photos to different model agencies, and you could become a male supermodel someday type of situation. So that is how he lured some of these men. Same thing that he did to the little boys that were teenagers. I mean, you're a teenager, most teenagers want to have money in their pockets, and they were easy targets. Clearly, the baby boomers were too busy having fun because they trusted each other. I mean, they relied on each other even though they did not know each other when they would attend these concerts and raves where they use some of the bins to conceive some of you who are now Gen Xers and probably listening to this video. Hey, I'm a Gen Xer myself. I would say I'm a late Gen Xer, early millennial, so I don't know, but you get what I'm trying to say here. So that is how he used the tactic of luring these boys and young men with money and a promise of becoming supermodels. And also the modus operandi, once he gets them to his grandmother's house, he would spike their drinks and then strangle them. And after strangling them, he would then dismember them, and then he would use different body parts for different things. But once the person has passed on, he would then unzip and he would expose his erected ding-a-ling and begins to shake it off, which is scomora, the word I'm going to be using. He would scomora, and after scomoring, he would then dismember the body and then does stuff that you would find out some of these bodies, what he would do with them, which is sick. So there was a time that when he's lazy, he would use his grandmother's bathtub to dismember some of his victims with his grandmother right next door. And I'm not quite sure why the grandmother did not, investigate what on earth is happening in her house? Because there will be sledgehammers that would be going on for hours on end, and there would be slashing and banging and I don't understand, honestly, because from what I understand, the grandmother was not that old to crawl herself with a walking stick to the basement or to the bathroom. She was quite capable. She was quite healthy herself. Now, not to investigate or at least be curious, I don't understand, because I feel like a lot of people would have been alive if she took some sort of curiosity and saved lives. So after having enough of Jeffrey Dahmer and the man that he kept bringing to the house, Jeffrey's grandmother decided to chuck him out of the house. She said, "You need to pack up and leave, because I am tired of these banging and these men that you keep bringing to the house." And so Jeffrey Dahmer decided to get himself an apartment on 25th North in Milwaukee. Apartment, I think it's Oxford apartment buildings, and he managed to get himself apartment 213 or 213, which has become, if you know, you know. Apartment 213 is a true crime storyteller's ingrained number that also kind of scary if you think about it. And so that is where Jeffrey Dahmer found himself, in a rundown building on 25th North in Milwaukee, a building called Oxford Apartment Building. Of course, this area was filled with black people, Hispanic people, people that were poor and often neglected by the government, especially the police, because any crime that was reported there, it was not necessarily taken seriously if the perpetrator was a white person. So, and it was also a place where LGBTQ community members also resided, and the police at the time discriminated heavily against gay people, particularly gay men. So in that 1990, when Jeffrey Dahmer got himself this apartment, which to this very day is known to be the worst crime scene in the history of the United States. Earlier I mentioned that Jeffrey Dahmer got arrested for sexual assault of a 13-year-old boy. Yeah, that was 2 weeks after he moved into this apartment, and the young man the young boy that he had essayed by the name of Kason Sithisanphone. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the surname. And well, he lured him to his apartment where he drugged him, and then he essayed the little boy. So Jeffrey Dahmer, of course, he got arrested, even though the arrest came after the family really fought to get him incarcerated, or at least justice be served. But because he was a white man and he did what he did to a brown child, that was not particularly taken seriously, because he got a slap in the wrist and sent away home. But before he was sent home, he was sent to counseling once again for some kind of mental evaluation. So where he was diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. The unfortunate part about this, Jeffrey Dahmer was never prosecuted, let alone, well, he was convicted, but it was probation. So for some reason or another, Jeffrey Dahmer, after he got arrested for the essay of Kason, he became paranoid. He thought that the police were watching his apartment, and so he was like, the urge to, unalive again just got even hotter. So he meets 24-year-old Anthony Sears, who was an aspirant model. Of course, it was easy, was an easy target, because Jeffrey Dahmer promised him to make him a model if he could come back to his grandmother's house, where he is going to take some photos of him that he will send to model agencies But when he got to the grandmother's house in the basement, he drugged and unalived Anthony Sears. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting because Jeffrey Dahmer, he starts collecting souvenirs from the victims that he would unalive. He started with Anthony Sears, and what he does to Anthony Sears is despicable. So as you know, that once he unalives his victims, he would unzip and whip out his erected ding-a-ling, and then he will shake it off, basically scomora, and when he comes to, that's when he would start dismembering the body. With Sears, this is when he started collecting skulls of his victims. So he carefully took Sears' head and put it in a bowl filled with acid and basically dissolved the flesh of the bone, took his skull and then placed it in a cabinet in his bedroom for his admiration. In 1989, Jeffrey Dahmer gets arrested again for essaying another little boy, and this time around he does spend some time in prison, but he would be let out to go to work as he had work release. He had work release because the system said they don't want him to lose his job at the chocolate factory. How nice. In 1990, Jeffrey Dahmer meets 32-year-old Raymond Smith, a male prostitute whom he promised $50 for having sex with him. So of course, Raymond Smith, being a male prostitute, agreed to go with Jeffrey Dahmer to his apartment, where he drugged him, strangled him, took Polaroid pictures with Smith's body, basically scomora, while taking pictures while he's busy scomoring, and yeah, and then he began to dismember Smith. Remember, this is when this is his second victim. He is going to collect souvenirs because he also collects the head of Smith. He once again puts it in acid to dissolve the flesh, and then took the skull and put it next to Sears's. Now, this is the time where the neighbors at the Oxford apartment building started complaining about the foul smell coming from apartment 213 or 213. Well, Dahmer would say, listen, I'm having refrigerator issues, and the meat that I'm putting in there, it goes off. And I'm working and busy, and I don't have the time to clean the refrigerator of the rotten meat. But the neighbors were like, nah, this is too much, it's enough. And so they tried by all means to complain to the management of the building, so much so that the manager did go to apartment 213 to investigate for herself to see what exactly is going on there. But she came back with no evidence, and yet in Jeffrey Dahmer's bed or bedroom there were cops. Yep, there were cops of Sears, cops of Anthony, and I don't know why this person did not do a thorough search. I don't know, maybe they needed some kind of a warrant or whatever the case was. But she left with just making an order to Jeffrey that he needs to get his act together and clean up his stinking apartment. In 1990, Jeffrey Dahmer would unalive 27-year-old Edward Smith, and basically he did exactly what he did with others. He lured him to his apartment, drugged him, unalived him, scomored, and then he started dismembering his body. Took the head, dissolved the head of the flesh, and then took the skull and lined it up along Sears and Anthony, and then he took all of his body parts and stashed them in the refrigerator for retaining them. However, at a later stage, he decided to discard of Smith's body. This is Edward Smith. In the same year of 1990, around September, he unalives 22-year-old Ernest Miller, who was a dancer. Again, he did the same thing as he did with his previous victims. Lured him by promising him $50 for taking pictures that he will send to model agencies, because Ernest also wanted to be a model and thought, oh, this is my luck. And when he got to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, he got drugged and strangled, and then from there, Jeffrey Dahmer scomored and dismembered his body. And the interesting part, this is where Jeffrey Dahmer started eating some of his victims. Well, cannibalism. 3 weeks after unaliving Ernest Miller, Jeffrey Dahmer meets 22-year-old David Thomas. When he took him to his apartment, he realized that, nah, I'm not attracted to this guy. So he unalives him. Well, he drugs him, and then he strangles him, and then he dismembers his body. Basically, he discards it because he's not attracted to him like he has been with the other ones. So now it is February 1991, and he's now about to unalive his 10th victim. 10 people. Don't forget Stephen Hicks. That's 11 people that he's unalived already. So the 10th victim is 17-year-old Curtis Strouder, whom he meets at a bus stop. Makes a promise that if he posed for naked pictures for him, he will give him $50. But he will have to take these photos at his apartment. Of course, Curtis, being a 17-year-old, naive, and thinking about the money, he follows Jeffrey Dahmer to his apartment. So when he got to the apartment with Curtis Strouder, he then drugs him and then strangles him. And then while he is busy with his body, basically he whips out his erected ding-a-ling and then he scomora onto Curtis's body. And while he's doing the scomoring, he is taking photos of the entire process, basically creating Polaroid photos of him doing such an awful thing to Curtis. Once he was done taking photos and scomored, he then dismembered Curtis's body, and then he cut off Curtis's ding-a-ling and put it in a zip bag to preserve it. And then he took some parts of Curtis's body and then he kind of like put it away for eating later. And then he took Curtis's head, done the same thing that he done to the other ones by putting acid all over it to wear off the skin of the skull, and then took the skull and lined it along the others that he had already collected. But something quite interesting about Curtis's skull, he did not put it in a cabinet. He just displayed it in his house. In April of 1991, he meets 19-year-old Errol Lindsay. Of course, he lures him with money and taking photos and making him a model. And of course, Errol was like, wow, this is very good. And then he goes with Jeffrey Dahmer to his apartment. He drugs him, but does not strangle him immediately. But instead, he takes a drill and drills a hole in his skull. And then he puts hydraulic acid to make him a sex zombie. Where have you ever heard of something like that in your life? Yeah, he wanted to turn him into a sex zombie. So the idea of a sex zombie to Jeffrey Dahmer, his own mind, he says, well, the body will be functioning normally, but the brain will be, well, not functional. It will adhere to every command that he orders the sex zombie to do. Basically, he wanted to do anything and everything he wanted to the sex zombie. So, of course, by 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was on an unaliving spree. He was just going wild at unaliving young men and little boys. Clearly, he was addicted to unaliving people and screwed up in the head, of course. And at this point, Jeffrey Dahmer had a victim almost every week in his apartment, and he would unalive them, dismember them, And then he would discard of the body parts, keeping some body parts. He even kept hands and liver and 2 hearts of some of his victims. So one of the things when he was asked during the interrogation, so why did you eat them? And I quote, he said, "It was a way of making me feel they were a part of me." Remember, he struggles with separation anxiety. And the reason why he was unaliving these people, he says, is that he was afraid that they were going to leave him once they come to his apartment. So the little control that he had was to drug them, strangle them, and of course gets to do the things that he fantasizes about when he is with these men that he picks up from gay bars, bus stops, malls, and everywhere else that he found them. In May of 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer meets 31-year-old Anthony Hughes, a deaf man. Now, something was quite different about this victim that he picked up again at a club. He does not unalive Anthony Hughes immediately, but instead a sort of bond created between him and Hughes that was created by Jeffrey Dahmer. He was extremely attracted to Hughes, and he wanted to know more about Hughes. One of the things that he wanted to know from Hughes was, how did he get deaf? And then of course Hughes told him that it was a disease that gradually took away his hearing aid, and as a result he became a deaf man. Now, with all the language barriers, so they devised a plan that you would handwrite everything that I ask you, because Hughes was using sign. And that's how he communicates with his friends, that's how he communicates with his family. But with Jeffrey, he would handwrite all the response that Jeffrey asked questions about. And so Jeffrey kind of like felt somewhat human towards Hughes. So much so that they spent a couple of days. Now, Hughes, of course, you can see what's going on in the apartment. It is stenchy, it smells bad. And also everything else that is probably he's noticing and just decided, you know what, I think I may have found love, because he's also attracted to Jeffrey Dahmer. Remember, I said many people considered him to be quite handsome and attractive. So he thought, oh, okay, at least I would get some kind of companionship from this man called Jeffrey. So because Jeffrey struggles with separation anxiety and also the fear of being alone, he then strangles. Number one, he drugs and strangles Anthony Hughes, and then he dismembers him. Now, people that knew Anthony Hughes described him as kind. Even Jeffrey Dahmer said the same thing. He was kind, he was soft, and he seemed to care about the issues of the world, particularly the LGBTQ rights, which Anthony Hughes was very active for the rights of gay people to be recognized in the United States. So that kind of made him feel included, and at the same time he feared that Anthony Hughes was going to leave him. And when Jeffrey Dahmer was asked about Anthony Hughes, he said, "I felt an emotional connection to him. I wanted it to last forever." And he further said, Anthony Hughes was attractive, enjoyable to hang around with, and quite smart. So when he was asked, so then why did you unalive him? He said, "I was afraid that he is going to leave me, so I had to unalive him." Not only did he unalive Anthony Hughes, he also cannibalized him, he ate him. So because of the story that Jeffrey Dahmer was telling about Anthony Hughes, that he was a sex worker, his mother was like, never. My child was never a sex worker. He was an upstanding young man who fought for the rights of the LGBTQ rights, and also he was participating in all other activities that people do. He had a good head on his shoulders. He minded his own business. He was an independent dancer who had his own apartment. He was not bothering anybody. and she did not understand why Jeffrey would do something as horrible as he did to him. So Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbors increasingly got agitated by Jeffrey Dahmer's stench that is coming from his apartment 213. So much so that they started calling the police. One woman by the name of Glenda Lewis called the police basically to report a naked, bleeding child that ran out of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. Now, one of the things that they also noticed about the man that he brought to his apartment, they were seen going in but never seen going out. And also the noise that was going on inside of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. A chainsaw going on and on for hours on end, some banging, some kind of strange screaming going on in his apartment as well. They told this to the police. The police did come to do a welfare check in apartment 213. They just looked around, noticed that it's a white guy who's a little bit weird and very filthy, and then they left. And yet, while Sears' body, while all the other bodies as well of the recently unalived victims laid in his bedroom on the corner, some of them put in some bins with acid filled up to the brim, and they did not do their due diligence. They just ruled him as a weird guy and they left. So when Dahmer realized that the people were complaining once again, all he did calmly and said, listen, my refrigerator is broken and I have fish in the refrigerator. It's the one that's stinking. So get over yourselves. And for me, what I cannot understand is the police finally come to Jeffrey Dahmer's house. They see skulls just displayed for everybody to see, but they don't ask questions. What are they thinking that is? And they leave. And the other thing that made the police not to take Jeffrey Dahmer and all the complaints seriously is because the complaints came from black people, majority of them. And as I said earlier, back in those days in the United States, racism was the order of the day. And if anything that was bad happened to black people, the police did not necessarily care, let alone did they due diligence. Because when they went into Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, they saw a white guy and thought, well, he's a little strange, he's normal, calm, he speaks normally, there's nothing of concern. And I'm thinking, take one of the skulls to forensics or a medical examiner or somebody who can tell this is a real human skull. No, they don't do that. However, some people say if it was an apartment of a black man and people made a complaint about a strange smell, they would have turned that apartment upside down and found every skeleton, every skull, every ding-a-ling, and every heart and arrested the black man. But because it is Jeffrey Dahmer, who also knew very well that his skin color will let him get away literally with unaliving people. So on the 27th of May 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer lures a 14-year-old boy by the name of Conoric Phone. Does that surname sound familiar? Yeah, that's because 2 years ago, in 1988, he lured 13-year-old Kason Phone, the older brother of Conoric, and then with the brother, this one, he brought him into his apartment, drugged him. Before even the drugs kicked in, he took the boy, took the drill, and drilled a hole in his head, and then injected into his brain hydraulic acid. Why? Because he wanted to turn him into a sex zombie. So since the first one failed, he thought, hey, maybe next time I'll be better, and all the mistakes that I made with the first one, I'm not gonna make with this one. Yeah, 14 years old. So now the question I'm asking myself, why does he go for 14-year-olds? And I'm not gonna be making excuses here. I'm also trying to make sense of this because I always try to make sense of the heinous crimes that these people commit. And I've done that with other serial unalivers before. where I'm thinking the reason why he's probably going for 14-year-olds is because in him, he has that 14-year-old who never got to be in a relationship like his peers were able to openly have girlfriends. And because he struggles with homosexuality, I'm not going to say it's a struggle, I don't know whatever it is, but you get what I'm trying to say. He then could not express his attraction or love for another boy, so that boy inside of him never grew up. That boy also struggled a lot with separation anxiety. So that is why he would get a 14-year-old boy or a 17-year-old boy, drills a hole in their skull, inject hydraulic acid to make them zombies so that he can do as he pleases with them. I guess to satisfy that 14-year-old boy that never got to have love or a relationship as a teenager. I don't know. That is what I'm trying to make sense of this. So where did he meet Conorak? He met Conorak at Grand Avenue Mall and made a promise of giving him $50 if he would pose some nice, interesting poses for him. Well, the difference was he did take pictures of Conorak at the mall. So when he developed some kind of trust, then Conorak did not mind when Jeffrey Dahmer invited him to his apartment for a hangout and then give him his money and off he goes home. Well, that did not happen. Now, remember when Glenda Lewis made a call and complained about the foul smell coming from Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment and a naked child that left his apartment and went across the street? Yeah, that was Conrad. Because while Jeffrey Dahmer went out to buy a beer, Conrad managed to escape. He ran straight out of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, naked and bleeding from the head. And across the street, there were two women. One of them, I think their names are Sandra and Nicole. And when they saw what was happening, they took hold of Conrad and then tried to cover him to protect him from the cold, and they called 911. And indeed, 911 did, come, and instead of the police calling the ambulance so that Conrad is taken care of because of the blood coming out of his skull, they are questioning these women about this boy. So much so that Jeffrey Dahmer saw the police car, came over it, and said, "Hey, that is my boyfriend. We were just having a quarrel. It's a lover's quarrel type of situation. Can I have him back so that we can continue solving our issue?" All this happened because we're both drunk. So the police said, "Oh, well, problem solved. Hey, let's help you take this 14-year-old boy." But this is what Jeffrey Dahmer tells the police. This 14-year-old is his 19-year-old boyfriend. Now, the police hearing homosexuality, they were like, ew. But because we're police officers, let's help you take this victim, who is 14 years old, back to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. And then they said, "Hey, keep it down, keep it cool, stop fighting," and then they leave. An hour later, Jeffrey Dahmer continued to inject more hydraulic acid into Conorak's head to a point where he actually died. If that does not make you upset at the police, then I don't know what will. The boy managed to escape. All they had to do is call the ambulance and not let him go upstairs to a man who, it's evident that he's bleeding. So therefore, there was some kind of violence that took place. And the police job is to do what? To arrest the perpetrator. But no, they help him take back his victim to his apartment. Now, the Conorak's family knew exactly when Conorak disappeared who was responsible. They told the police who was responsible. And the police, they did not take it seriously. They did not take it seriously. All of this could have ended with Conorak. All of it could have ended. But instead, 5 more people would be unalived by Jeffrey Dahmer after Conorak. Even the police admitted to that. They're like, yeah, after Conorak, 5 more people were unalived. And were they ever held accountable? No. Again, you have to wonder, back in those days, in 1990, no campaigns about stranger dangers. Don't go with older people when they want to give you sweets and money. I don't get it. So remember when Glenda Lewis told the police about the naked boy? Yeah, this is who he was talking about. When the police came to his apartment, just looked around and left. And they did not ask about a bleeding naked boy. And the colleagues, they take him back to his unaliver. So when Conorak passed on, again, Jeffrey Dahmer did the most despicable. He unzipped himself, scomored, took photos while he was busy doing that, and then cut up Conorak, dissolving his head and placing it along the other skulls in his house. In June of 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer meets a 20-year-old Matthew Turner in Chicago. He then persuades him to accompany him back to Milwaukee, where he is going to take some photos of him and send his photos or his portfolio to modeling agencies. So when they arrived at Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment 213, Matthew Turner was drugged, strangled, and then dismembered. Of course, Jeffrey Dahmer took his skull, put it away, took some internal organs, the heart and the liver, put them in a zip bag and put them in the freezer. So between the 7th to the 19th of July 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer will unalive 3 more young men. So at this point, he goes back to Chicago. He comes back with 20-year-old Jeremiah Wayne Berger. When Wayne Berger got to the apartment because he was promised a weekend holiday or vacation, he was disgusted at what he saw, and he made an intentional expression to Jeffrey Dahmer that he would like to leave. Big mistake. His biggest fear, being told straight on his face that I want to leave. What do you think happened? And you already know that Jeffrey Dahmer struggles with separation anxiety. He doesn't want to be left. So he did to Jeremiah what he did to others. Dragged him, strangled him. After he had passed on, unzipped himself, scomored. After scomoring, he then dismembered him and discarded of his body parts, but kept the skull. A few days after unaliving Jeremiah, he meets another 24-year-old young man by the name of Oliver Lacey. Oliver Lacey came to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment because he was promised $100 for posing naked for Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, he needed the money and he thought, okay, let's go. And then when he got to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, this is when Jeffrey Dahmer proceeded to drug him and then strangled him. After strangling him, unzipped himself, did the thing, taking photos of the process. And when he was done, he then dismembered Lacey. Now, he took Lacey's head without putting it in acid and put it in the freezer for preservation. About 4 days after unaliving Oliver, Jeffrey Dahmer gets fired from his job. You would think he will be grieving, upset, and probably looking for a new job. No. Jeffrey Dahmer was going for his next victim. And this is when he meets and lures 25-year-old Joseph Bradhoft to his apartment. When he got there, he did what he did with the other ones. He drugged him, he strangled him. But instead of dismembering his body, he takes it to his bed in his bedroom, lays Joseph's body on his bed, leaves him there, and then continues to look for more victims. So later on, he came back to Joseph and then took his head and put it in a freezer as well. So on the 22nd of July 1991, the police are just doing their job patrolling around when they come across a man frantically flagging them down, begging them for help. The man was in handcuffs. And so the police stopped and thought, oh, this is quite interesting. How can we help you? And then he talks about a freaky man that lured him to his apartment, held a knife against him when he got into the apartment, and slapped him with the handcuffs. And then he said, if you screamed or resisted, I will cut off your heart and eat it. Telling 32-year-old Tracy Edward. So of course the police thought, gay people again doing gay things. And so they're like, okay, show us the apartment. This 32-year-old Mr. Edward, who just escaped near-death experience, takes the police upstairs to apartment 213. Then the police, when they got to the door, they knocked. Jeffrey Dahmer, who was not wearing a shirt, he calmly and gently answers the door. He sees the police and sees his victim that escaped and said, oh, I know why you are here. Anyways, my guy and I, we were doing some freak stuff, and so he freaked out, and the keys to the handcuffs are on my nightstand. Let me go get them. But the police decided to walk in with him. So they started looking around, and one of the officers see a slightly open drawer. He sneaks, look into it, and then he sees Polaroid pictures. He's like, these are Polaroid pictures. And Jeffrey Dahmer calmly says, yeah, whatever. But the gig was up for Jeffrey Dahmer, because that officer, upon seeing other things, including the foul smell in his apartment, tells his partner, listen, these are real. And that is when Jeffrey Dahmer realized that the gig is up. He attempted to escape, but they subdued him, and they brought him back into the house, and the officers called for backup. Now that is what I call policing. Not what all the other ones have been doing. All of this would have been stopped at Conrack. Not even at Conrack. Probably at Stephen Hicks. So how exactly did Tracy Edward, escape? So he says he meets Jeffrey Dahmer at the mall, and Jeffrey Dahmer basically persuades him to come to his apartment because he looked like a model. He would like to take some pictures of him, and it also turned out that Tracy Edward was quite handsome and he was very attractive to Jeffrey Dahmer. So he was like, okay, cool, let's go. Goes to the apartment. When he gets into the apartment, the first thing that hit him in the face was a terrible stench of rotting meat, he says. So when he realizes that something is not right, he tried to leave. This is when Jeffrey Dahmer takes out a knife, placed it against his chest, and said, if you left and if you don't cooperate, I will cut off your heart and eat it. And so he slaps him with those handcuffs and throws him onto his bed. Now, in the bedroom, remember, there are a couple of bodies, which you are going to find out soon. And he then realized, listen, I need to play a strategy here for my survival. So when Jeffrey Dahmer was talking to him, Tracy would gently, softly, friendly respond, to make him feel like, hey, I'm not a threat, I'm okay, hey, we will do what you want to do. He was assuming he wanted sex. And so he was like, whatever you want, I'm ready to do it with you. And so Jeffrey Dahmer also started calming down when he was off guard and not paying attention to whatever, because now he trusts this victim. This is when Tracy got an opportunity to punch Jeffrey Dahmer in the face and then ran through the front door, and that is when he flagged down the police. So in no time, Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment was littered with police from every department. Investigators, medical examiners, you name them. Forensics were all over Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. And I'm gonna read you the things that they got there, because some of them I don't think I'll be able to remember. So I'm gonna be looking at my laptop here to show you the amount of evil this man has caused. All right. So the police, they went into the refrigerator. They came across four. Number one, they came across two severed heads that were just in the refrigerator. But as they continued digging into the refrigerator, they came across four more severed heads, two hearts also in the refrigerator. All, of course, for preservation and for consumption a little later. They discovered 7 skulls in Dahmer's bedroom, as well as an entire human torso in his freezer. As the police continued to dig, they came across preserved dinglings, yeah, 2 entire skeletons, severed hands, and 3 more torsos that were submerged in a drum filled with acid. It's a container filled with acid, and 3 torsos were in there, some in different stages of decomposition and also, I think, melting. So yeah, this is where the Jeffrey Dahmer unaliving spree came to an end, with 17 young men and also little boys. The nightmare came to an end thanks to 32-year-old Tracy Edwards. So Jeffrey Dahmer finally got arrested, and yeah, every psychologist and psychiatrist and anybody that wanted to study him, yeah, they wanted a piece of him, because they wanted to know what on earth is going on with him. When his parents found out what he had done, his father suddenly was in the picture. I'm not quite sure if it was guilt of some sort, and then spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Dahmer while he was behind bars, while investigations were going on, so much so that they even agreed that they were going to co-author a book, Jeffrey Dahmer. I think Jeffrey Dahmer's father's book is called A Father's Story or something like that. Disgusting. To profit out of the atrocities of your son's doing. Disgusting. So when Jeffrey Dahmer was taken to the interrogation room, he did not put up a fight, he did not resist, and he did not lawyer up. So the police thought, okay, because he says he wants to make a confession, in most cases in a country that has a rule of law, you would actually get your lawyer present so that you do not incriminate yourself and say things that might incriminate you, and then you find yourself spending a lengthy life sentence and things like that. So Jeffrey Dahmer was like, I want to confess, I don't want no lawyer. And he told every gory detail of how he met these men, as well as these young boys, what was his intentions. And then he even went as far as saying, well, there are 2 more other bodies that I have in Ohio. Yeah, this is Stephen Hicks, his first victim. And he told them everything, absolutely everything about his unaliving spree. So I'm also going to read you a small, not a necessarily small, notes that I also wrote. He simply confessed to everything. The police gave him hours to ask for an attorney, but he wouldn't. He told them everything from Stephen Hicks, his first victim, when he was 18 years old in 1978. After his confession, the number of pages of his confession were about 170 pages long. And it was describing details of what he had done. If you are interested, well, you're already here. Let's read what he said in his confession. In the confession, he described it and detailed how he managed to get these men and boys to his grandmother's house, and subsequently, when he got his own apartment, how he also lured him to his apartment and alived them. He also confessed about his struggle with necrophilia. If you don't know what necrophilia is, it's when after the body or the guy has passed on, he would do these disgusting acts, scomoring, and some would literally have sex with the dead body. But with him, he would just scomora over the body while taking photos, scomoring on the bodies. He even went as far as confessing his cannibalism on some of the bodies, especially the guys he was really attracted to and didn't want them to leave. Jeffrey Dahmer admitted cooking and eating human liver, hearts, and some parts of muscles. Dahmer said that he wasn't eating the victims because he enjoyed eating them, but he said it is because it made him feel powerful. He further said that he didn't see the act of cannibalism as violence or violent, but a way to preserve connection. He craved connection. He craved companionship. And my question is, could you just go up to a guy and say, hey, I like you? If the guy punches you in the face, well, that means move on to somebody who eventually will also find you attractive and then spark up a relationship and stay together by treating each other good, not cheating, and then they'll stay forever. Right? Isn't that what normal people do? Maybe not. Well, anyways, it was clear that Dahmer craved love, gay love, in an era where homosexuality was a taboo, and he couldn't freely love and be loved openly. That is what I say in my notes. And then I further say in my note, it was also clear that he was attracted to black men. Very clear. And I don't think it was just because he could get away with it. I think he genuinely was attracted to black men. And I don't know, maybe because of prejudice against black people, and him being a white person and white people finding out that he is in a relationship with black people, it was going to cause a whole hoo-ha on top of homophobia and all of that stuff. So I think it's a mess. And then I continue to say, I assume that the inclusion of boys is the young Jeffrey, who probably saw his peers in middle school with girlfriends, and because he was gay, he didn't have the chance to also have a boyfriend and express himself freely like his straight peers could with their girlfriends. Perhaps along the way he developed separation anxiety that was misguided and accompanied by impulsive behavior, hence the unaliving of his victims. There is no excuse, of course, in unaliving people. There is absolutely no excuse, because I've noticed a certain group of people, they would make excuses for them about mental health and what. And then another group who really do have mental health issues, but they are still incarcerated, convicted, and the keys thrown away. Jeffrey Dahmer was asked how he felt about getting caught. He said that he was relieved. And when an FBI psychologist had a conversation with him, he also said he was relieved that he got caught. Dahmer also told the psychologist that the best place for him is prison, because if I were to be released, because that's the question was asked by the psychologist, if you had to be released tomorrow, will you go back to doing what you did? He says, I would go right back to the same behavior, including unaliving. Yeah. So on the 30th of January 1993, Jeffrey Dahmer's court hearing began. Remember, he had made a confession, therefore there's not going to be a trial. However, there is going to be some kind of a hearing, including mitigation of sentence and things like that. So he was brought into the court, calm, cool as a cucumber, non-reactionary, no remorse shown. He was just Jeffrey Dahmer. He was brought in, and of course Jeffrey Dahmer's court hearing would also have a media circus. The media circus, of course, also attracted all kinds of people that you can imagine. That also includes women that are attracted to serial unalivers. I'm not quite sure if they got the memo that the one that they were busy supporting and attracted to was a homosexual. Are they paying attention? Because clearly Jeffrey Dahmer does not have an iota of attraction towards them. And he did not care that he had those people outside. Of course, the victims' families were also called to the court hearing so they can hear the gory details of how their loved ones departed from this world through Jeffrey Dahmer. So Jeffrey Dahmer was charged with 15 counts of unaliving in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and also he confessed to 2 more that he committed in Ohio. Of course, he pleaded guilty, but he said, wait a minute, I am guilty, but I'm also sick in the head. I'm insane. He said his compulsion and fantasies and disorders rendered him incapable of stopping. That's what he was telling the court, like, have mercy on me, I'm sick. I don't deserve jail. I'm sick. So of course, the court hearing, it was all about hearing if he had culpa or culpability of doing the things that he had done, or he had a diminished responsibility type of situation. However, upon hearing everything that was going on, the court made a remark to Jeffrey Dahmer. So basically, this is what the court noted: that Dahmer was methodical. He lured the victim, drugged them, he unalived them, dismembered them. He would commit sexual acts on the bodies, and then he would then try to keep body parts. The court continued to say that he was never in a delusional psychosis. He was calculating, he concealed evidence, he knew what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong. So of course, all kinds of experts were also called on the stand to testify their expert testimony on Jeffrey Dahmer. That also included his mental health, physical, you name it, everybody was there. That also included police investigators, medical examiners, psychologists, and victims' families were also all there. Jeffrey Dahmer's defense team took the mental health issue route. They were like, oh, he's mentally ill, he had diminished responsibility, and saying that he suffered from necrophilia, borderline personality disorder, schizotypical disorder. They even pointed to his attempts to make these sex zombies and the horror of the crime that they couldn't have been committed by a normal person who understood between wrong and right. However, the defense experts did admit that Jeffrey Dahmer actually knew what he was doing, and he also knew that it was wrong. Otherwise, he would not concealed the unaliving of these people and did the things that he did to them if he didn't know that it was wrong. Then, of course, the expert continued to substantiate their findings that he's very much saying the hiding of the bodies, the lying to the police, and covering his tracks would show that he's legally sane. And of course, the jury did agree, and on the 15th of February 1992, Jeffrey Dahmer would be determined as sane, guilty, and he was sentenced to 15 life sentences. 15 of the 17. And he would serve these sentences consecutively. So that means Jeffrey Dahmer would be imprisoned forever, because after he's done with the first, he will have to go again and serve the next. I guess life sentences, like in South Africa, it's 25 years. So he will have to serve 15, 25 years in prison. How many is that? What's the math? So after the sentencing of his 15 life imprisonment consecutively, he was then extradited to Ohio, where he was found guilty for the death of Stephen Hicks, and he was also hit with a life sentence term. So in the final statement, Dahmer told the court that I never wanted freedom. Frankly, I wanted death. I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed on my own, and this is the only way I know how to find peace. The victims' families, they did not buy the manipulation that he was trying to portray. Like, please forgive me, I'm insane type of situation. And if it's going to console you, just know that I wanted the death penalty, but they want to keep me here. So they were not shaken or moved by that act. So many of the family gave heartbreaking victim impact statements. One of the, I think this one has to be the deaf guy's sister, because they kind of like look alike type of situation. She charged at Jeffrey Dahmer in court when she was giving her victim impact statement. So much so that she had to be restrained by the court marshals in the courtroom. Jeffrey Dahmer acted as if all of this was not happening. Like, nothing to see here, nothing to see. He was calm, and the lady was charging at him. So after all it was said and done, Jeffrey Dahmer was then remitted to Columbia Correctional Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it was reported that he had found religion behind the iron bars, like they all do. Even here in South Africa, most of the serial unalivers, they're now Christians and Muslims. So like I said, Jeffrey Dahmer's father reappeared, and they were spending a lot of time, and they had some kind of forgiveness thing going on between the two of them. David Dahmer was like, this family anyways was not worth it. He changed his entire identity and never appeared in public, ever. I mean, it is assumed that he's 58 years old today. On the other hand, his mother, Joyce, said, my son needs to be mentally evaluated. You need to study his brain, he said, when they, like, I don't know, open it up and study it type of situation. That's what she wanted. So of course, this story got authors also writing books. In 1993, The Shrine of Jeffrey Dahmer was published, and I come across it in 2001 at the Johannesburg Library, and that sparked an interest in true crime. I've been very much interested in true crime ever since. And now that we have YouTube, I was like, oh, let me tell true crime stories of some serial unalivers that we had in this country. If you are interested, there are lots of these videos on this channel that I have uploaded that you can learn about the serial unalivers in this country, just as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer was. So on the 28th of November 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer is released from isolation. I'm not quite sure what he had done that put him in isolation, and he was given some tasks to do with two other prisoners, basically to clean prison bathrooms and also do some cleaning as well, the passageways, and some gardening and all of that stuff. This is what prisoners are expected to do, especially those that are serving long sentences in prison. So the two gentlemen that he was with themselves were spending life imprisonment. One was a wife unaliver, and the other one, he was mentally ill, and he had an unaliving sentence which put him life in prison. And so they were busy cleaning the prison bathroom when Mr. Scarver, so there's Mr. Anderson and Mr. Scarver that were with Jeffrey Dahmer. So Mr. Scarver takes, and guys, please, I don't know. To me, it sounds like a plan, but let me know if I'm losing my mind. Mr. Scarver takes an iron bar, you know those iron bars that you get at the gym that holds those weights? Yeah, it's in the bathroom. And then he takes that iron bar and then attacks both Mr. Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer, unaliving them. Yeah. Now the question is, who put the iron bar in the bathroom? Secondly, what happened to the police officers or the wardens that were supposed to supervise them? Because prisoners need to be supervised 24 hours. Every move they make, the police or the prison warden will move along with the prisoner, especially in an environment like the bathroom cleaning duties. So I suspect somebody knew how Scarver felt about Anderson as well as Jeffrey Dahmer. So at a later stage, when Mr. Scarver was asked, why did you do it? He said he had resentment towards both of them. Because number one, they used to make fun of him. Number two, he resented Jeffrey Dahmer because he hated black people because of the way he unalived them. And then he also resented Anderson for unaliving his wife. So these are something he felt it was a divine act because God told him to do it. That's what he said. So yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer dies on the 28th of November 1994 from an attack from a fellow inmate. Nah, I still say this was orchestrated. Somebody orchestrated this. Somebody said he needs to go and we need to find somebody who hates him enough to can't resist doing something to him. And so they found a mentally ill prisoner and paired him up with another prisoner who is a wife unaliver. And they used this man. Probably they even instructed him, I don't know. It just does not make sense to me. An iron bar, a gym iron bar in the bathroom. And then conveniently, the supervisors are not there. 20 minutes later, Christopher Scarvey realizes we are alone and let me do this. Takes that iron bar and does what he does. So, like I said, when Christopher Scarvey was asked, he said he snapped because both men mocked him. He further says that he especially resented Dahmer's crimes against black men and the way that Dahmer would joke in prison, especially when he would play with his food, mimicking body parts, using ketchup as blood. So Scarvey said that he unalived them both as a form of divine justice, claiming that God told him to do it. So at 9:11 a.m. on the 28th of November 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was pronounced dead. And of course, people celebrated those that did. Others thought he got away with a tougher situation. He got it the easy way out. He should have suffered in prison, grew old and suffered in prison type of situation. But if you listen to him, he said death was what he wanted. I don't know. Anyways, the Oxford apartment building was torn down. It was demolished by the Milwaukee City Council because they thought that no person should live in a place with such horrible history. And of course, the owners of the apartment agreed, as well as the community agreed, and the victim's family also agreed. The place or the ground where that particular building was situated to this very day is still vacant. However, the communities do use it for some events. Some of these events has something to do with healing, and they would use that, and they call it a memorial green ground or something like that. But it's not official because there's nothing that shows that is a memorial. There's no statue, there's no monument, nothing that shows that, but people in their heads, that is where they say it's a place of horror. And I'm also thinking it's a good thing that it was torn down, not because it was already run down and in a dangerous area, but there are these freaky people who go to tour, like tourists in things like that, like a haunted house type of situation, or where a family of some sort was slaughtered and they go as tourists. So definitely they were going to make money and profit out of that horror. Just like the Netflix series, I think it was opportunistic, especially because they did not consult any of the victims' family members. They felt mocked and they felt like it was immoral and wrong. So that's why I didn't watch it. So tell me what you think about Jeffrey Dahmer. What do you think was his issue? I made my own conclusion that he struggled with separation anxiety. Many people do struggle with separation anxiety, myself included. The moment you and I connect, when it's time for you to leave, I want to live along with you. I don't want you to say I want to go with you type of situation. But of course, I have to understand that you have your own life, own friends, own people to go and entertain. And then I have to sit back home and lick my wounds. But did I ever think of doing what Jeffrey done? No. Like, I couldn't even unalive a fly, let alone a human being. So we all struggle with one thing or another, but it's all about self-control. If you feel like your self-control is diminishing, go and admit yourself. Get counseling, get therapy, get something before you do something outrageous like what Jeffrey Dahmer ended up doing. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please don't leave the video without doing this a big favor by smashing that like button. And also subscribe to the channel because I've got more stories like this one coming your way. And share the video far and wide. And do not forget to leave a comment as well. I'll see you next time with a new video. Goodbye.